So I'm going to be reading the book, The Two Babylons, or the popular worship proved to be the worship of Nimrod, ALEXANDER HISLOP. We're going to go to page 91, chapter 3, Festivals, Christmas and Lady Day. But first, we're going to go to the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 1, verse 9. The thing that has been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It has been already of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, like our rulership in Europe, the medieval empire of the Israelites, the Moors, etc. Neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. Chapter 3, number 1, Christmas and Lady Day. If Rome be indeed the Babylon of the Apocalypse, and the Madonna enshrined in her sanctuaries be the very Queen of Heaven, for the worshipping of whom the fierce anger of the Most High was provoked against the Israelites, I'm going to say Israelites instead of Jews, in the days of Jeremiah, it is of the last consequence that the fact should be established beyond all possibility of doubt, for that being once established, everyone who trembles at the word of the Most High must shudder at the very thought of giving such a system, either individually or nationally, the least countenance or support. Something has been said already that goes far to prove the identity of the Roman and the Babylonian systems. But at every step, the evidence becomes still more overwhelming. That which arises from comparing the different festivals is particularly so. The festivals of Rome are innumerable, but 5 of the most important may be singled out for education, if I'm pronouncing it right. Christmas Day, Lady Day, Easter, Nativity of St. John, and the Feast of the Assumption. Each and all of these can be proved to be Babylonian. And first, as to the festival in honor of the birth of Christ, or HaMashiach, or Christmas. How come it is that the festival was connected with the 25th of December? There is not a word in the scriptures about the precise day of his birth.
There is not a word in the scriptures about the precise day of his birth,
or the time of the year when he was born. What is recorded there implies that at what time soever his birth took place, it could have not been on the 25th of December, because we know that is the winter solstice, okay? At the time that the angel announced his birth to the shepherds of Bethlehem, they were feeding their flocks by night in the open fields. Now, no doubt the climate of Palestine is not so severe as the climate of this country, but even there, though the heat of the day be considerable, the cold of the night from December to February is very piercing, and it was not the custom for the shepherds of Judea in the open fields later than about the end of October. It is in the last degree incredible then that the birth of Christ could have taken place at the end of December. There is great unanimity among the commentators on this point. Besides Barnes, Doddridge, Lightfoot, Joseph, Scaliger, and Jennings in his Jewish Antiquities, who are all of opinion that December 25th could not be the right time of our Lord's nativity. The celebrated Joseph Medi pronounced a very decisive opinion to the same effect after a long and careful disquisition on the subject. Among other arguments, he added the following: at the birth of Christ, every woman and child was to go to be taxed at the city whereto they belonged. Now, what month do we know where we're being taxed? Income tax, right? Around April, March, April, around that time. Whether some had long journeys, but the middle of winter was not fitting for such a business, especially for women with child and children to travel in. Therefore, Hamashiach, or Christ, could not be born in the depth of winter. Again, at the time of Christ's birth, the shepherds lay abroad watching with their flocks in the night time. But this was not likely to be in the middle of the winter. And if any shall think the winter wind was not so extreme in these parts, let him remember the words of Christ in the gospel. Pray that your flight be not in the winter. If the winter was so bad a time to flee in, it seems no fit time for shepherds to lie in the fields and the woman and child to travel in. Indeed, is admitted by the most learned and candid writers of all parties that the day of our Lord's birth cannot be determined, and that within the Christian church no such festival as Christmas was ever heard of till the 3rd century, and that was not till the 4th century was far advanced did it gain much observance. How then did the Romish church fix on December 25th as Christmas Day? Why thus long before the 4th century and long before the Christian era itself, a festival was celebrated among the heathen? At that precise time of the year, in honor of the birth of the son of the Babylonian queen of heaven. And it may fairly be presumed that in order to conciliate the heathen and to swell the number of the normal adherents of Christianity, the same festival was adopted by the Roman Church in giving it only the name of Christ. We see right here, a festival was celebrated among the heathen. So we got to go to the book of Jeremiah, right? So we're at Jeremiah chapter 10. Hear ye the words of the Most High speaketh unto you, O house of Israel, the 12 tribes, right? Thus says the Most High, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. For the heathen are dismayed at them, for the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. They are upright as the palm tree, as they worship Osiris back in Egypt in days of antiquity. But speak not, they must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good. For as much as there is none like unto thee, O Lord, thou art great, and thy name is great in might. And I'll skip down to verse 8. But they are altogether brutish and foolish. The stock is a doctrine of vanities. So Christmas is pagan, ancient pagan, and it has no significance. It has nothing to do with the scriptures. Just like the church. Church has nothing to do with the so-called Bible or the Torah. They just attach themselves to it. All it is ancient Babylonian Kemetic mystery religion system. That's all it is. Nothing new under the sun. We are just incarnations repeating a cycle. We need to wake up. This tendency on the part of Christians to meet paganism halfway was very early developed. And we find Tertullian, even in his day, about the year 230, bitterly lamenting inconsistency of the disciples of Christ in this respect, and contrasting it to with strict fidelity of the pagans to their own superstition. By thus says he, who are strangers to Sabbaths and new moons and festivals, once acceptable to God or the Most High, the Saturnalia, the feast of January, the Brumalia, and the Montronalia are now frequent. Gifts are carried to and fro. New Year's Day presents are made with din, and sports and banquets are celebrated with uproar. Oh, how much more faithful are the heathen to their religion, who take special care to adopt no solemnity from the Christians. Upright men strive to stem the tide, but in spite of all their efforts, the apostate went on till the church, with the exception of a small remnant, was submerged under pagan superstition. That Christmas was originally a pagan festival is beyond all doubt. The time of the year and the ceremonies with which it is still celebrated prove its origin. In Egypt, the son of Isis, the Egyptian title for the Queen of Heaven, was born at this very time, about the time of the winter solstice. This very name by which Christmas is properly known among ourselves, Yule Day, proves at once its pagan and Babylonian origin. Yule is the Chaldee name for an infant or little child, and as the 25th of December was called by our pagan Anglo-Saxon ancestors, Yule Day, or the Child's Day, and the night that preceded it, Mother Night, long before they came in contact with Christianity, that significantly proves its real character. Far and wide in the realms of paganism was this birth observed. This festival has been commonly believed to have had only an astronomical character, referring simply to the completion of the sun's yearly course and the commencement of a new cycle. But there is undoubtedly evidence that the festival in question had a much higher reference than this. That is, commemorated not merely the figurative birthday of the sun and the renewal. That is, commemorated not merely the figurative birthday of the sun and the renewal of its course, but the birthday of the grand deliverer. Among the Sabaeans of Arabia, who regarded the moon and not the sun as a visible symbol of the favorite object of their idolatry, the same period was observed as the birth festival. Thus we read in Stanley's Sabaeans philosophy, on the 24th of the 10th month, that is December, according to our reckoning, the Arabians celebrated the birthday of the Lord, that is the moon. The Lord moon was the great object of the Arabian worship, and that Lord moon, according to them, was born on the 24th of December, which clearly shows that the birth which they celebrated had no necessary connection with the course of the sun. It is worthy of special note, too, that if Christmas Day among the ancient Saxons, so a code name for ancient in any of these books, they're saying that the so-called indigenous tribes really across the whole world were people of color, melanated, carbon rich. Okay, that's just a code name for it, ancient. This island was observed to celebrate the birth of any lord of the host of heaven. The Saxons, is as well known, regarded the sun as a female divinity and the moon as a male. It must have been the birthday of the Lord moon, therefore, and not of the sun, that was celebrated by them on the 25th of December, even as the birthday of the same Lord moon was observed by the Arabians on the 24th of December. The name of the Lord moon in the East seems to have been Mini, for this appears the most natural interpretation of the divine statement in Isaiah, I can't read that, 11. But ye are they that forsake my holy mountain, that prepare a temple for Gad, and that furnish the drink offerings unto Mene. There is reason to believe that Gad refers to the sun god, and that Mene, in like manner, designates the moon divinity. Even where the sun was the favorite object of worship, as in Babylon itself and elsewhere, at this festival he was worshipped not merely as the orb of the day, but as a god incarnate. It was an essential principle of the Babylonian system. The sun, or Baal, Baal, was the one only God. 2 Thessalonians 2:7, for the mystery of iniquity doth already work, which is idolatry. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. When therefore Tammuz was worshipped as God incarnate, that implied also that he was a incarnation of the Son of God, right? In the Hindu mythology, which is admitted to be essentially Babylonian, this comes out very distinctively. There, Surya, or the sun, is represented as being incarnate and born for the purpose of subduing the enemies of God, who without such a birth could not have been subdued. Okay. This was precisely the way in which, according to Berus, the drunken festival of the month, the Beth, entering to our December, in other words, the festival of Bacchus, was celebrated in Babylon. A bachelor's degree in Ivy League. Today, the term bacchanalia is bandied about at almost any gathering where the guests get a bit tipsy and mildly frisky, but originally referred to a specific ancient Roman celebration, the friends' rites of Bacchus, god of wine and intoxication. It was the custom, says he, during the 5 days it lasted, for the masters to be in subject to their servants, and one of them ruled the house, clothed in a purple garment like a king. As we can see, we have LeBron James, quote unquote, the king, in purple. And we see royal is synonymous for royal garments, especially in the ancient world. In Rome, the Phoenicians, the Shemitic Hebrews of color, per se. So right here we have in ancient Rome, position of imperial status. 2, Roman Catholic Church, official dress of a cardinal, so named after the Tyrol purple color of the robes. Number 3, of a color intermediate between red and blue, Republican and Democratic, hailing and galactic, both on the same team. Excessively elaborate or showily expressed in belonging to or befitting a supreme ruler. As we can see, the vice president has on the color purple, esoterically signifying her as a royal or supreme ruler. Okay. And we know that the Canaanites or the Phoenicians were famous for the color purple, if I'm not mistaken. Also, you can look at the Lakers. They got the purple and gold. The Vikings, purple and gold. Purple is a very symbolic color, I'll say. This purple robed servant was called Zoganes, the man of sport and wantonness, and answered exactly to the Lord of Misrule that in the Dark Ages was chosen in all popish countries to head the reveals of Christmas. The wassailing bowls of Christmas had its precise counterpart in the drunken festival of Babylon. What do they do in Christmas? They get drunk, right? Eggnog, and so forth.
1647. Here's a summary from Wikipedia. In 1647, the Puritan-led English Parliament banned the celebration of Christmas, replacing it with a day of fasting and considering it a popish festival with no biblical justification.
In a time of wasteful and immoral behavior. Point blank, period. Okay? Saturnalia.
According to Wikipedia, Saturnalia was an ancient Roman festival and holiday in honor of the god Saturn, held on the 17th of December of the Julian calendar and later expanded with festivities through to the 23rd of December.
Let's see, what happened during Saturnalia? During Saturnalia, work and business came to a halt, federal holiday. Schools and courts of law closed, nothing new under the sun, and the normal social patterns were suspended. Everything's closed, all the stores, right? Instead of working, Romans, which were Roman U.S. citizens, spent Saturnalia/Christmas gambling, singing Christmas carols, playing music, feasting, socializing, and giving each other gifts. If you wrap shit in a box, it's still gonna be shit. No matter how many times you rewrap it and put new paper around it, shit's still gonna be shit. So you can dress it up how many times you want, but it's all the same. People are living a life in delusion. Right here we're on the History Channel, or history.com. I really don't like this website, but the Christian holiday of Christmas especially owes many of its traditions to the ancient Roman festival, including the time of year Christmas is celebrated. The Bible, I repeat, the Bible does not give a date for Jesus' birth. I repeat, the Bible does not give a date for Jesus' birth. In fact, some theologians have concluded he was probably born in spring. That is really the new year. Life begins when nature and trees and everything springs forth, not in the dead of the winter. Okay? As suggested, let me see. As suggested by references to shepherds and sheep in the nativity story. Okay? By the 4th century AD, Western Christian churches settled on celebrating Christmas on December 25th, which allowed them to incorporate the holiday with Saturnalia and other popular pagan midwinter traditions. There you go. Let me see. The Wesleyan Bowl of Christmas had its precise counterpart in the drunken festival of Babylon. In many of the other observances, the Wesleyan Bowl of Christmas had its precise counterpart in the drunken festival of Babylon. And many of the other observances still kept up among ourselves at Christmas came from the very same quarter. The candles in some parts of England lighted on Christmas Eve and used so long as the festival season lasts were equally lighted by the pagans on the eve of the festival of the Babylonian god to do honor to him. For it was one of the distinguishing particularities of his worship to have lighted wax candles on his altars. The Christmas tree, now so common among us, was equally common in pagan Rome and pagan Egypt. In Egypt, the tree was the palm tree. In Rome, it was the fir, the palm tree denoting the pagan Messiah as Baal Tamar. the fir referring to him as Baal Berith, the mother of Adonis, the sun god and great mediatorial divinity, was mystically said to have been changed into a tree, and when in that state to have brought forth her divine son. If the mother was a tree, the son must have been recognized as the man, the branch, and this entirely accounts for the putting of the Yule log into the fire on Christmas Eve and the appearance of the Christmas tree the next morning. As Zero Ashta, the seed of the woman, which name also signifies ignorant, I can't pronounce that word, Agina, or born of fire, he has to enter the fire on Mother Night, that he may be born the next day out of it, as the branch of God, or the tree that brings all divine gifts to man. But why, it may be asked, does he enter the fire under the symbol of the log? To understand this, it must be remembered that the divine child born at the winter solstice was born as a new incarnation of the great God, after that God had been cut into pieces on purpose to revenge his death upon his murderers. Now, the great God, cut in the midst of his power and glory, was symbolized as a huge tree, stripped of all its branches and cut down almost to the ground. But the great serpent, the symbol of the life restoring Equilibus, if I'm pronouncing it right, probably butchered that word, twists itself around the dead stalk, and lo, at its side up sprouts a young tree, a tree of an entirely different kind that is destined never to be cut down by hostile power, even the palm tree, the well-known symbol of victory. The Christmas tree, as has been stated, was generally at Rome a different tree, even the fir. But the very same idea was implied in the palm tree, was implied in the Christmas fir, for that covertly symbolized the newborn god Baal Berith, the Lord of the covenant, and thus shadowed forth the purity and everlasting nature of his power, not that after having fallen before his enemies, he had a risen trumpet over them all. Okay. Therefore, the 25th of December, the day that was observed at Rome as the day when the victorious God reappeared on earth, was held at the Natalis Invictus Solis, the birthday of the unconquered sun. Now the Yule log is the dead stock of Nimrod, deified as the sun god, but cut down by his enemies. The Christmas tree is Nimrod Redivus, the slain god, come to life again. And the light reflected by the above statement on customs still linger among us, the origin of which has been lost in the midst of hoar antiquity. Let the reader look at the singular practice still kept in the South on Christmas Eve of kissing under the mistletoe. That mistletoe, in the Druidic superstition, which, as we have seen, was derived from Babylon, was a representation of the Messiah, the man, the branch. The mistletoe was regarded as a divine branch, a branch that came from heaven and grew upon a tree that sprung out of the earth. Thus, by the engrafting of the celestial branch into the earthly tree, heaven and earth that sin had served were joined together, and thus the mistletoe became the token of divine reconciliation to man, the kiss being the well-known token of pardon and reconciliation. Whence could such an idea have come? May it not have come from the 85th Psalms, verse 10 and 11. Mercy and truth are met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed each other. Truth shall spring out of the earth in consequence of the coming of the promised Savior. And righteousness shall look down from heaven. Certain it is that psalm was written soon after the Babylonian captivity, and as multitudes of the Israelites or Jews after that event still remained in Babylon under the guidance of inspired men such as Daniel as a part of the divine word, it must have been communicated to them as well as their kinsmen in Palestine. Babylon was at the time the center of the civilized world, and thus paganism, corrupting the divine symbol as it ever has done, had opportunities of sending forth its debased counterfeit of the truth to all the ends of the earth. Like the religious systems of today, Christianity, Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholics, Baptists, all debased counterfeit of the truth to the ends of the earth. Christianity, through the mysteries that were affiliated with the great central system of Babylon. Thus, the very customs of Christmas still exist, cast surprising light at once on the revelations of grace made to all the earth, and the efforts made by Satan and his emissaries to materialize, carnalize, and degrade them. In many countries, the boar was sacrificed to the god for the injury a boar was fabled to have done him. According to one version of the story of the death of Adonis or Tammuz, it was, as we have seen, in consequence of a wound from the tusk of a boar that he died. Okay? Just going to read a couple more highlighted points. There can be no doubt then that the pagan festival at the winter solstice, in other words, Christmas, was held in honor of the birth of the Babylonian Messiah, not Jesus Christ. Okay? So we have this book right here, Path of the Kabbalah. Go to page 168, The Way of the Mystic. I'm just going to read some of the highlighted points. Another way why Kabbalists reject Jesus as the Messiah is that the prophets clearly speak of the Messiah as a son of man, not as a son of God. The notion of the Messiah as a son of God has no basis in the Bible. The prophets preach quite clearly that the Messiah would be a human being, not a demigod, the son of Adam, in fact, and would live and die, just like all of us humans, just as all people have done. Even Solomon alluded to this in the books that they took out of the 1611 King James Bible, the Apocrypha. Now we're going to go to the Apocrypha. Wisdom of Solomon. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7, 1-6. Man's only entrance, which is the matrix or the womb, etymology of words, is through the woman and the man's seed or scepter. Okay? I myself also am a mortal man, like to all, and the offspring of him that was the first made of the earth, Adam. And in my mother's womb, or the matrix, was fashioned to be flesh in the time of 10 months, being compact in blood of the seed of man, and the pleasure that came with sleep or sex. And when I was born, I drew in the common air and fell upon the earth, which is of like nature, and the first voice which I uttered was crying, as all others do. I was nursed in swaddling clothes, and that with cares, for there is no king that had any other beginning of birth. Key word, for there is no king that had any other beginning of birth. So there was no immaculate birth. Okay? In order to have life on this earth, you have to have a man and a woman. Natural law, right? For all men have one entrance into life, and the like going out. Okay? Wherefore I prayed, and the understanding was given me. I called upon the Most High, Ahia, and the spirit of wisdom came to me. I preferred her before scepters and thrones, and esteemed riches nothing in comparison of her. Okay, you get the point. So there is no immaculate birth. You got to have a man's seed. 1 + 1 = 2. You can't have one without the other, in my opinion, and based on what I'm reading. The Catholic idea of the Immaculate Conception raises many objections for Kabbalists, aside from the explanation that Joseph adopted the infant Jesus. The two Babylons, or the Papal worship, proved to be the worship of Nimrod, okay? A counterfeit. This is because the Jewish prophecies, I'll just say that word, teach that the Messiah will be scion of the house of David, which is through the man's seed. Actually, this teaching has led to two schools of Christian thought on the identity of Jesus, so-called Jesus. Some schools trace Joseph back to the house of David, but if Jesus was born of Mary and not of Joseph, how could he be considered a descendant of David? Other scriptures in the New Testament suggest through that Mary originated from the house of David. So two versions have long existed, and we know that certain sects believe that the genealogy is traced through the paternal, I think it's maternal, through the mother's line, and then paternal is the father's line. The Torah says the genealogy is traced through the man's seed, the Y chromosome. Okay. The whole question of the Immaculate Conception is quite interesting because it seems to hinge on a mistranslation of the Hebrew word. The Hebrew term is Nadara, literally a young girl. Let me highlight that. Or let me say that again. The Hebrew term is Nadara, literally a young girl. The prophets preach that a Nadara will conceive and give birth to the Messiah, but the Hebrew word does not mean a virgin. Historically, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible somehow mistranslated the word as virgin. Thus, early Christian thinkers felt compelled to insist that Jesus had been born of a virgin. Okay. However, the Hebrew word for virgin is Betula, and nowhere in the prophetic books does it appear. A third reason why Kabbalists reject so-called Jesus as the Messiah is that the prophets indicate that the Messiah will die and then his son will continue his mission. Obviously, this situation did not occur with so-called Jesus. Finally, the Kabbalists point to the prophecies that the Messiah will do nothing to alter the Torah as it exists. And of course, Christianity diverged very sharply from Judaism in its laws of observance. It must be acknowledged through that some Christians to this day insist that Jesus never sought to alter the Torah, and that only later did his followers institute the various changes from the Jewish to the Christian practice. For these reasons, then Kabbalists and Jews in general cannot embrace Jesus as having been the Messiah. Okay. It's quite interesting. This is a book that'll definitely make you think outside the box, what we've been indoctrinated and taught with. Right. Go to page 165, the Messiah. We come now to the Kabbalistic teaching about the Messiah. Here we must look at the Jewish or Israelite concept in relation to the Christian notion. First, the Hebrew term is Moshiach or Ameshiach, literally the anointed one, the one who is anointed. In biblical days, the prophets would anoint special individuals, such as one who was to be king. The Hebrew king was always anointed by a prophet. Therefore, Jewish tradition has it that the Mashiach is to be like a king and is to be anointed by a prophet. Another way to look at this idea is that the Messiah is a messenger. His function is to raise humanity's consciousness.